AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host, Mark Kelly, brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
Today's guest is Scott Clendaniel. Scott is an AI and analytics executive at Legg Mason. I want to start this interview. I want to say that all opinions are his own. Scott, very welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's great to be here.
Scott, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we can go kind of straight into some kind of examples you're going to be sharing with us today.
Absolutely. I am actually older than dirt. I started working in the field all the way back in 1986. Where I started off in financial services for Citicorp. I then stayed in financial services for a better part of 14 years, ended up as vice president of consumer lending for Bank of Hawaii. And then I had a family emergency, which caused me to move back to the Baltimore area. And I was then stuck because most of the major financial players in banking had left the city. So I had to quickly think, okay, now what can I do to try and have gainful employment? And I decided, that predictive modeling stuff, that seemed to work pretty well. Let's see if I can do something with that. And then embarked on consulting for the better part of 20 years, and finally ended up here working for Legg Mason.
So there's so much hype around machine learning, AI at the moment, and I've probably interviewed close to nearly 100 people. And 1 minute I'm totally excited, and the next minute I'm down in the dumps because of
I completely understand.
Being brittle, narrow AI is never gonna reach the hype. It's kind of toy data sets, and then suddenly it's like we're kind of seeing anomalies in cancer detection, bringing drugs to market. So I'm like up and down all the time. Tell us about some of the examples that you've seen where we can genuinely generate some benefits and make a difference.
Absolutely. I think that part of the challenge with the hype of AI is the fact that we went for a very long time where people didn't believe that machine learning or predictive modeling could do much of anything. It was okay for credit scoring, but we didn't really think it had any other applications. And then in the past 10 years, the pendulum has swung, I think, too far the other way, where artificial intelligence is going to make our breakfast and clean our clothes and go to work for us and all those types of things. I think the reality sits somewhere in between. I think if the field had stopped calling itself artificial intelligence and just referred to itself as advanced analytics, we'd probably all be in a better state because there definitely are real-world applications. Fraud detection is one that really helps out a lot of organizations and is difficult to do in any way outside of AI. I think there are huge opportunities in terms of programs in cancer detection and in health overall. I think there are lots of applications to generally remove waste, whether it's limiting the number of emails that someone sends to someone who doesn't want to receive them, or being able to make processes more efficient. So in those ways, I think that part of hype is absolutely correct. I used to joke that as far as I can tell, when it comes to artificial intelligence, it's 100% artificial. Sometimes the rest of us are still looking for the intelligence part. But I think it has to do with codifying better ways to make decisions.
So in financial services, for me, it's really interesting about the kind of the anomaly detections that we can see, particularly in merchant sales, for example, these small little things, and an awful lot will be said about how it's kind of driving deep learning through that, and actually kind of conversational nets. Tell me a little bit about some of the challenges actually deploying some of these and applying these models to data sets. So your novice might be sitting there and thinking, okay, I'll just apply that, and after a few hours we're good to go, and we'll kind of see some inferences and we'll save loads of money and catch the bad guys. But what's the reality like?
I think the reality is pretty different. One of the challenges, especially for smaller organizations, is if you currently have a portfolio that has close to no fraud, or let's say actually has zero fraud so far, the organization is new, for example, let's say, and you go to apply anomaly detection to try and look for fraud. Well, if you're looking for fraud in the transactions you already have, and you know that there is no fraud in the portfolio, whatever anomaly detection finds, what do you know from the very beginning? You know from the beginning that it isn't fraud. So just the fact that it's an anomaly doesn't necessarily equal fraud. So you have to make sure that you're starting from a place where you actually have examples of fraud, or you're not going to be able to find it. And anomaly detection is actually going to lead you to believe that you can find it. And I think that's a very dangerous place to be.
Yes. And what about the kind of cost of some of these models and also the time to actually run?
I think that deep learning is an amazing development in the field and has many wonderful applications in terms of if you're doing computer vision or you're doing audio translation or those types of applications. Deep learning is absolutely the tool you should be using. But what very few people discuss is the fact that it has some pretty severe drawbacks to it. One of them is it takes an enormous amount of data to train, and it takes an enormous amount of time to train, and it also takes an enormous amount of time to score a given record. So if you're in financial services and you want to apply something against, let's say, live transactions, deep learning can be very problematic. So I think we would all be better off if we tried to fit the right tool with the right problem, and it isn't always deep learning.
Yeah, because it's funny, when I speak to people around AI, I get some pockets, they're just very frustrated. They're frustrated that people are so focused on machine learning, in deep learning. They're concerned that so many other parts of AI are just being neglected. The money isn't being invested in them. And you're kind of working off a lot of the same algorithms and not that new innovations are really coming through something else. So maybe some kind of bee colonies, kind of ant colonies, and how they kind of they do some cool things as well. There's an awful lot of stuff around language. NLP is starting to see people are kind of forgetting about it. So there's an awful lot of people that are kind of pushing back against this. What's your kind of thoughts on that?
Well, a gentleman in the industry who I respect a tremendous amount is named Eric King, who runs the modeling agency out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Told me something 25 years ago that I still remember. Probably should not be using a neural network to balance your checkbook. It's not going to provide a whole lot of value, but it has a really high chance of frustrating you very much. Yeah. So again, logistic regression can still be applied to a lot of problems. Just like you don't need to have a Ferrari to be able to get from your house to work in the morning, you probably don't need an adversarial neural network to be able to figure out if someone's going to open an email or not.
So a lot of this stuff could be done maybe a decision tree, or if you're feeling kind of excited, maybe
Absolutely.
A few decision tree and you got a random forest, for example.
Absolutely. I have a nickname as being the tree hugger because I'm a big fan of decision trees for solving a lot of problems, especially if what you're after is understanding.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to explain those models to executive board, for example, or trying to generate investment rather than actually explain something else where you can't explain it to a 10-year-old. And particularly in financial services, you have to have models that are very easily explainable and to ensure that there's considerations from so many different biases that can be done. Maybe talk about a little bit about kind of explainable AI and kind of black box concerns or opaque models where you don't quite understand what's going on under the hood. Have you got those type of experiences yourself?
Yes, I have. I think that the general purpose of analytics as a whole is understanding, not just prediction. I think when it comes to financial services, you have issues where you have regulators who need to understand what your model is doing, you have executives who need to understand it, and you have consumers that you need to be able to explain to them if they were turned down for a loan, what happened and why that happened. So the challenge I have with deep learning generally isn't that it isn't a wonderful technique, but that it has some severe downsides. And people need to be aware of both sides to make the right decision on which algorithm to pick.
And how do you think we can become smarter at explaining these models, kind of having kind of a more approachable conversations, kind of getting kind of democratization for people to get involved and understand it? Because I always think of my granny, I think of my young kids, digital dexterity, and some of these words and acronyms and catchphrases, they're like random forest, what does that mean? All these different terminologies. How can we kind of help do a better job at that?
Boy, we are an industry who loves our jargon. That is for certain. And I think that's one of the challenges. I think that we need to recognize that the overall purpose of analytics isn't just prediction, it's understanding. If we need to explain to our kids how to drive a car, we don't start with the physics of an internal combustion engine. Instead, we're going to teach them you need to get to place A to place B. You need to know what the steering wheel does. You need to know how the brakes work, what the gears are, those types of things. And that's the same approach we need to take with AI. Rather than get into all the equations from the get-go, we need to help people understand why they should be interested in the first place, and then have them get a full grasp of how to get from place A to place B.
Here at Alldus, we want to make the hiring process easier for all. Whether you're an employer or an aspiring employee, we have the service for you. For full-time work, Alldus will partner with you to find the best person for the position. Using both our network and our rigorous qualification process, we ensure that only the best talent is shortlisted. We will manage the process and work with you to select our most suitable candidate for your organisation. We also offer excellent temp hiring services. At Alldus, we provide a great opportunity to help you and our candidate make the right choice. The contract period is one long interview for your full-time opening, and the extended experience with our consultant helps you make the best decision. Alldus International is here to quickly help you find the best AI candidate. Our experts stay in close contact with our consultants throughout the duration of the contract, ensuring they have everything they need to get the job done.
So we're speaking to Scott Clendaniel. Scott is an executive in machine learning / AI and kind of senior person within analytics. He's worked in a variety of different experiences for those last 20 years. He's currently working for Legg Mason. All opinions are his own. Scott, where do you see the next 2 to 3 years of machine learning / AI kind of playing out?
I'm a little concerned in terms of we've already been through 2 AI winters. Yes. And we don't want to have that happen again. And I think we need to make sure that we haven't swung the pendulum too far from people originally believing that AI was a complete myth. And then the pendulum is swung to the other side, that AI is going to solve every problem in the world. The truth is always somewhere in between. And I think that the next 2 to 3 years, if we as a community don't focus on making the process more understandable and more approachable, that a lot of people are going to throw up their hands in the air and say, I knew this stuff didn't work.
Yeah, and that's a challenge, because you see the big boys are really positioning this. Google have changed their conference, now the AI conference. It's like Google, Microsoft are really driving the AI aspect of Azure, their platform, Amazon. So everyone's really kind of coming across this terminology. And it's funny, I was at a conference yesterday. 5 years ago, it would have been called a statistics conference. 2 years ago, it would have been called a data science conference, and yesterday was called an AI conference. And it's just funny how these things have kind of progressed. Sometimes I kind of play around and say we're all just doing advanced statistics, right? So it's one of those different areas. So we do have to be very careful and mindful for the hype, because even when people are engaging with chatbots, they're expecting AGI, and it's only very narrow, brittle AI that we need to be mindful of.
Absolutely. I think that it was a mistake for the industry as a whole to glom onto the term artificial intelligence, and I think that causes a lot of the issues, because they're expecting an android to show up and cook their breakfast for them and make their beds and go to work for them. That's not really what we're in the business of.
It's definitely one of those things that we need to be mindful. And me, for one, I'm really, really excited about the future, but you always just kind of taking it with a kind of a pinch of salt too. So you're listening to the AI in Action podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kelly. We've been speaking to Scott Clendaniel. Scott, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. For more information, contact mark@alldus.com. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career, and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.